All right, we are out here talking once more about the Vancouver Canucks and where exactly things might be with this team. Now, I am recording this literally just a few hours after the Vancouver Canucks lost to the Carolina Hurricanes in overtime. Big shout out to Kevin Lankinen. He gave the Canucks a fighting dying chance, and unfortunately the team was not able to do anything in the OT to prevent a beautiful setup to Sebastian Aho from Shane Gostisbehere. Unfortunately, Quinn Hughes and JT Miller both attacked the defenseman a little bit too heavily. But in this video, I wanted to dive into some of the extra notes from after the game and some reactions we are seeing in regards to some of the top players and some of the top Swedes on the team. In particular, we are referring to Rick Tocchet's comments on what I'm going to call the second line, if we're going to assume the first line is Besser, Miller, DeBrusk. The second line of the Vancouver Canucks in this game featured Elias Pettersson, NILS Hoglander, and Connor Garland. And one of the questions that was going out there in the post-game interview talked about the changes, because throughout the game you did see some extra guys swapping around there. Arshdeep Baines ended up getting a spot with Elias Pettersson, etc., etc. So they asked Tocchet about the shuffling, and he said, obviously, if you change it, you don't like it, right? So I didn't like a couple of things, said Tocchet about the Garland, Hoglander, Pettersson line. I didn't like Hoggy at all. Petey... And then he stopped himself and said that he doesn't want to pick on that line. Now, before we dive into any other comments, let's take a look at the results of these three players on that line. The Canucks Impact Scorecard against Carolina via Hockey Stat Cards on Twitter. You had Besser, Miller, Brannstrom, Hughes, Suter, all as positive guys for the Vancouver Canucks against Carolina. And then if you scroll down, you can see that NILS Hoglander was meh. Elias Pettersson was meh. Connor Garland also kind of meh. And then at the very bottom you can see Soucy and Desharnais. So I will say Connor Garland looked a lot better, like visually speaking, especially on the man advantage. He did look a little bit better in my opinion than Pettersson and Hoglander, but these three guys were among some of the worst forwards on the team. Hoglander doing a little bit better than Danton Heinen, Sherwood, Baines, and Bluger. But it is interesting to note that Rick Tocchet's perception of these guys from the game was very negative. To even call out and say that he didn't like anything about NILS Hoglander's game and stopping himself before he dives into Elias Pettersson. Let's dive into more comments made by Tocchet. Noah Strang went out there and said this. Rick Tocchet says the changes are coming to the Canucks power play. Elias Pettersson has just 2 power play shots this year, and is 8th by individual expected goals despite ranking 4th in power play ice time. Could we see the team pull Petey off the top unit? Interesting reply from Brando talks about how last season this was also a thing. Pettersson is near the bottom of the league with 4 primary assists on the power play back from February 23rd. And so with this all buzzing around the consciousness of the Vancouver Canucks fan base, I wanted to just get some discourse going. Because for me personally, watching Elias Pettersson, obviously, I don't think there's been a moment this season or even back in the playoffs or any time before the playoffs where we had seen, quote-unquote, prime Petey. Prime Petey is when Elias Pettersson decides that he can just take over a shift, that he can take over a game, that he can go out there and score 5 points in a gosh darn contest. You know how many multi-point games he had last season in the first few months of the year? I actually don't know the answer to that question. So we're going to go over onto Elite Prospects and take a look at the game log here. So diving into the 2023-2024 season. This was for Elias Pettersson in his 89-point year. Never mind the 102-point season he had in 2022-2023. But in the opening months of the season, Elias Pettersson had a 4-point game in the first game of the night, multiple 3-point games, multiple 2-point games. He had, what was that, a bunch of 2s and a 3 and 2 4s in the span in January, accompanied by a 3 and multiple 2s. And then if you go back to Elias Pettersson's 2022-2023, so the actual 100-point year that he had, I mean, there was a really long point streak in there, which included multiple 3-point games, and then there was a 5-point game, and yeah, Pettersson could take over the league if he wanted to. We have not seen this caliber of play from Elias Pettersson in months. And you have to question, is it really boiling down to physical tools? Is it him not really working on his leg strength, or him not really feeling all too comfortable in his wrist, or whatever? Is he not shooting because he's not feeling good? Is it all mental? We're talking about his mentality and the way that he's being perceived by others in this market, and whether or not his friends are sending him commentary by the media or by fans to him, which would be 100% the worst possibility here. Like, obviously, we don't want to see Elias Pettersson reading the social media comments, because for a guy like him, I mean, Gen Z guy, spends a lot of time on his phone, understands the implications of social media on sports. That would be so bad. And for somebody who's already going through a little bit of a tough stretch and who is as hard on himself as he is, I mean, you can't be going out there and reading the comments, man. You can't. There's a reason why I, personally, don't dive too deeply into all the discourse and the hate that's in my comment section. You just shouldn't deal with it when you're in this position. You're ultimately setting yourself up for failure if you do so. So for Elias Pettersson, to have all of this stuff bleed into his gameplay, obviously it's not confirmed that this is exactly the case, but it was talked about by Elliot Friedman, to have all of these be conversation points at this point because he hasn't been playing his best. I mean, even Tocchet going out there and labeling it out, saying that the line performed poorly, and also talking about how there needs to be some changes on the power play. I'd say the power play yesterday, I mean, there were multiple chances where I feel like the Canucks ended up losing possession, or they gave it away because of an Elias Pettersson pass. Either he passed it a little bit too slowly, or he kind of made his pass too lackadaisically, or it was picked off, or he mishandled it a little bit. The guy has not been playing his best, even though he has been better over the past few games here compared to the very start of the season and during his time in the Predators and Oilers series in the playoffs. But this guy's making so much money. We can talk about Hoglander too. We can criticize parts of his game. Rick Tocchet certainly did in yesterday's post-game presser, but Hoglander's not making $11 million. Hoglander doesn't have a 100-point NHL season. Hoglander has never been that good. So obviously he gets a little bit more of a pass. We're more lenient on him and his faults. But for Elias Pettersson, obviously he's not going to recover from everything right away. He's going to take a little bit of time before he fully gets back up to speed. And I am going to say I believe in the guy to do that. Like, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd probably say it's likely that he gets another 100-point season or two by the time this contract that he is on ends up expiring. So I'm not really worried about him long term. It's just for right now, you know, you're seeing the Canucks go through this process. They're trying to retool. They're trying to get better. They're trying to incorporate these newer guys into the system. You kind of need to have your better guys, your established guys, being there and leading the charge so that guys like Jake DeBrusk can ride off of those coattails. Whether he's with Petey or he's with Miller and Brock, and to be fair, Miller and Brock have been fantastic, to say the least. Elias Pettersson has a lot of work to do, though. So I wanted to make a video about this. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Rick Tocchet speaking out against Pettersson and Hoglander from yesterday's Carolina Hurricanes game? The structure and the timing of this video is all strange because, yeah, this is coming out the noon after the game happened yesterday. So maybe by this time the video is uploaded, there are some new looks on the power play. Maybe the Canucks practice or whatever it is. There are some extra radio hits or extra talking points. If there is, then we can make another video about it later in today's show. But I got to go out there and take a nap first and foremost. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section about Rick Tocchet speaking out about Pettersson and Hoglander. What are your thoughts on his overall ability at this point in time? Do you think Pettersson is going to get better? What are your thoughts on the game's scorecard from earlier yesterday night as well? What are your thoughts on how Petey and Connor Garland actually were some of the worst ranked forwards on the team? Do you think that's a trend that's going to carry into the next little while here? Or do you think it is just a small little stint right now that is going to fix itself as the year goes on? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.